Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, everyone, day 3. How we all feeling? Good? Thank you to everyone who's in the crowd today and to everyone who's watching live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, our website. We appreciate you. We are kicking off today's Newsmaker Day with somebody who I've known for a short while but had a huge impact on my coverage. I am joined by Jeff Green, the CEO of The Trade Desk. He's kicking off our conversations today about better reach on the beach, how we are transforming the digital ad market. Jeff, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks. We're excited to have you here as well. This has been a very newsy week for everything that you have going on. Obviously, Trade Desk has been a huge critical supporter, backer of Universal ID, which is a solution for how we're going to target ads in a cookieless future. And we are now seeing the rollout of a European version of Universal ID. I would love your comments about how this initiative has evolved from being sort of a few partners in the US to now a global thing with dozens, if not hundreds, of publishers and ad tech partners that are a part of it.
Yeah, so in order for media to be monetized properly, we have to have an identifier that makes it so identity is ubiquitous and advertisers can bring their own data to the equation and content owners get higher CPMs as a result. This has obviously been started with a lot of the largest content owners in the United States, and we created UID2, or Unified ID 2.0. But we, about 2 years ago, created a separate instance of UID2 here in Europe called EUID. It was essentially a copy and paste, which we did for 2 main reasons. One, we wanted a different namespace for Europe so that the data was not portable. It didn't go back and forth between the US and Europe. That's really important for GDPR and local regulations to make certain that the data that comes from Europe stays in Europe. But then also, that's so that it could evolve differently because there are different laws like GDPR. It may evolve and iterate in slightly different ways. So EUID has been off to a little bit of a slower start than UID2 was, partly because of those nuances. But we launched with a number of partners this week, including Bacardi and Kimberly-Clark and Tesco and a dozen others. That just really exciting start to EUIDs sort of coming out, even though it's been in beta for the last year or so.
I mean, one of the reasons we're even talking about EUID is because we all know that we are entering a future without being able to target ads with cookies, but it's unclear when that actually comes to fruition. You know, Google says that they will end support for cookies by 2024, but some marketers are already taking action now, assuming that that's the future. When do you think that the full deprecation of cookies happens, or do you agree with those marketers that we just have to act like it's already happened?
Well, I think it's smart to prepare for a world without cookies. So while I do think it's strategically foolish for Google to get rid of cookies in Q1 2024, especially when they're under as much antitrust scrutiny as they are right now. When they made that announcement, they were under a lot of privacy scrutiny. But now the balance between antitrust scrutiny and privacy scrutiny has changed. So at a moment when they're under this much antitrust scrutiny, I don't think it's wise for them to get rid of first-party cookies in Q1 of 2024, which is the last date that they stated, especially because they haven't offered a good alternative, and Privacy Sandbox is not a good alternative. So I think it's strategically unwise for them to deprecate cookies in Q1. But I also think it's strategically stupid for the rest of us to expect for our plan A to be, oh, well, I just think cookies won't go away, so I won't do anything about it. So the rest of us have to plan and prepare for a world without cookies. Things like UID are a better world anyway, and they transcend the browsing internet, which is the only place where cookies are directly relevant. So especially publishers on the browsing web that have been pretty dependent on cookies, they need to be thinking about authentication strategies and identity strategies that go beyond the cookie. They're the ones, the publishing side of the browsing internet are the ones I'm most worried about, which is part of the reason why I think Gannett filed a lawsuit yesterday.
So let's rewind a little bit for those in the audience that might not know, and for those on the live stream that might not know. Trade Desk is one of the largest ad tech firms, publicly traded ad tech firms in the world. Obviously, you compete with the likes of Google and other ad tech platforms. You know, the comment that you made, which was very interesting, was that, you know, strategically it's foolish to get rid of cookies in 2024 because of antitrust scrutiny, speaking to your point about the Gannett lawsuit. But at the same time, you know, they don't have another alternative to the privacy pressures. So what would you do if you were them?
Yeah, if I'm Google, what I'm trying to do is figure out ways to make the marketplace more fair. And I recognize that at Google, they have conflict of interest all over the place. And I'm, of course, taking inventory of the places where I make money and what's existential to my business. So I would recognize that I make a lot of money in search. I make a lot of money in YouTube. I make a lot of money in network. But I don't necessarily have to own all the decisioning. I have to be careful about fairness in decisioning. I have to be careful about opacity in the supply chain between advertisers and publishers, especially when I'm not involved. I have to make certain that I don't have any draconian tactics. And I need to make certain that the market is fair. The auction dynamics have historically not always been fair, as especially the Texas Attorney General outlines in great specificity. If half those things are true, they just have a lot of things to fix.
So obviously right now, the solution that has been backed by Trade Desk, the Universal ID, why do you think that is a better replacement to cookies? Because some folks would say that that's just a Band-Aid, that that's creating another identifier solution instead of coming up with something that's like completely different, like interest-based targeting or something like that.
It is completely different. But the way that we designed this is we started by saying, what would we want as consumers? I want to be able to take my privacy settings with me. I want the right to be forgotten, which is exactly what GDPR created legislation for. I want to understand the quid pro quo that I'm signing up for every time I opt into content. And I want my relationship to be directly with the content providers. If I'm giving my information to Disney, I want to say, okay, Disney, you can have it. I don't want Apple, for instance, to be my intermediary for everything on the internet. I don't want to trust any one player with everything, especially when they give me prompts like, ask this publisher not to track. Like, what does that even mean? I don't really understand that.
I think most of us don't understand that, and we are all getting barraged with that question when we come here to Europe. So I want to kind of pivot outside of the regulatory environment, even though I know the Trade Desk plays an important role in that conversation, to what you all are doing on the commercial side of things. You know, we connected around the upfront season, which in the U.S., for our U.S. Folks in the audience and listeners, is a time in the spring where advertisers can meet with publishers to buy inventory ahead of time. And one of the things that we had discussed was that it feels antiquated to buy inventory ahead of time in this 24-hour digital environment. What would be your proposed solution then if we are not going to buy it ahead of time? How would you even go about buying something in real time?
Yeah, so I do think we can buy things ahead of time. I just think we need a forward market that's more sophisticated than just handshakes and martini lunches or the way the upfronts have been run historically, which were created in the 1960s. If you think about the way any market has evolved, including things like the stock market looks a lot different now than it did in the 1960s, when guys were waving little pieces of paper and yelling at each other. The upfronts has not changed enough in that time. So what we have right now in digital is we have a very sophisticated spot market where advertisers can bring data to the equation. It can bring data to bear. And CPMs go up. Publishers get paid a lot more. And programmatic has really shown the power of data in the advertising ecosystem and the power of personalization. As an industry, there's a really difficult task into taking that to a forward market because of the fact that when you're buying one impression at a time, you're betting fractions of a penny every time you buy something. But in the forward market, you're often committing millions. And historically, that has meant that you're giving away decisioning to the sell side.
Can you quickly just define, for those of the audience that might not know it as well, what is a spot market versus a forward market?
Yeah, spot market just means that it's transacting in real time. So it's happening at this very moment on the spot. Go ahead.
So in trying to transact in this moment, at the very moment that you're doing it, what is sort of like the downside and the upside to doing that, and what would be the downside and the upside to a forward market?
Yeah, so the downside to the spot market, if you're looking from a whole ecosystem, is that the publisher doesn't have any reassurance of what they're going to get. You run an auction on Hulu, and in less than 1/10 of 1 second, you'll find out what the highest bid is. So you have to make decisions in less than 1 second about who you're going to sell it to, and then only then do you learn what you're going to get as a content owner. So that can be anxiety producing if you're trying to manage yield, make sure that you sell everything. But the disadvantage right now to buying it on an upfront basis is that because there's not a good mechanism for advertisers to decide what they want in advance, you essentially just hand over your budget and a large commitment to a publisher, and then they decide which ones you get. Because you're handing over decisioning, you effectively get a discount. So the advertiser's paying much less on a CPM basis for that commitment. So the publisher, unfortunately, has to trade off between either high CPMs with lots of uncertainty in terms of fill and what they're going to actually sell, and the certainty which comes with much lower CPMs. But a sophisticated forward market, which is in its early stages today, brings the best of both worlds, where data can come to bear, higher CPMs can be achieved, certainty can be achieved, but it's much more difficult in the sense that you have to have a forward market that's not unlike commodities markets today, which require lots of great forecasting and price discovery and standardization, which our industry has historically not been very good at.
So question for you then, is the forward market something that Trade Desk is like creating just on behalf of your company, or are you trying to create a new system on behalf of the whole industry?
It's creating a new system on behalf of the whole industry, not one that we'll own per se, but one that will be a critical market maker in, and others will be the same.
So sort of similar to how you helped to push UID for the whole industry. Should we be thinking about it like that?
Exactly. So, there in most ecosystems, there's closed options and then there's open, right? So like Apple is a closed operating system, and whether you're comparing desktop to Windows, which is an open ecosystem, or the mobile iOS to Android, Android and Windows represent the open ecosystems, and Apple represents the closed ecosystem. We're just consistently the advocates for an open ecosystem where competition thrives and that creates a better market. We think that that's critically important for advertising, because advertising represents sort of a greater percentage of the equation of success as we look towards the future than it has in the past. So the difference between a company succeeding and failing is often how well it advertises and markets. That's always been true, but that's becoming increasingly true as the barriers to entry into business continue to go down.
And what do you mean by the business? You mean any type of business or digital businesses?
No, any type of business. So, I mean, you look at like cloud storage, and like there were companies like Box and Dropbox and hundreds of others that were all competing. Marketing, brand recognition, that's what distinguished those handful that survived and did really well. And even if that's marketing feature sets, it's getting the word out about that feature set and then getting growth and critical mass. More and more businesses are dependent upon how well they market. It's not as hard to make shoes anymore. It's harder to market them. It's harder to distinguish them from others. There's more brand lines than we've ever had in almost every category. The difference between success and failure is increasingly determined by advertising and marketing.
So let's go back to this idea of the forward market, something that you're pioneering and pushing forward, but that you expect the entire industry, you would hope to one day adopt. The problem with that, the pushback that I would give you, is that in order for a publisher to participate in something like that, and I think this is why they historically have not, they would need to have a pretty good sense of what their inventory is going to look like. And if we've seen anything from the writer's strike this past summer, that's really hard, especially for like big TV networks, to be able to accurately forecast, measure, predict, and then transact on ahead of time. So how would you address that? Do you agree that that's a problem?
I do think some of the volatility is a problem, but it's more predictable than it's been in the past.
Why?
Well, simply because we have more data and analytics. We didn't know how many people were going to show up. Our methods of measuring were not good in the past. So when you add greater sophistication in the way that we measure, a greater ability to predict that, way more signal to predict that, we're in a better position to create certainty around that than we've ever been. But also, markets don't get rid of uncertainty. Like, is there more or less uncertainty in the financial markets than there was before? No, I would argue there's more, but it doesn't mean that we don't get better at price discovery. It doesn't mean that markets don't get more sophisticated, and it certainly doesn't mean we avoid the creation of forward markets, because they've existed for hundreds of years in pretty much every industry, including advertising. It's just they get more sophisticated over time in order to capture price and value and transact more effectively.
So question for you. This was something that we talked about a few months ago, probably around February or March. The upfronts happened around May. We're now in the summer. When do you think real serious adoption of this type of forward market actually happens? Is it happening now? Is it getting to be, in full swing by the end of the year? What's the prediction there?
Well, I don't. It's hard to define what full swing is, in the sense that if you mean the majority of upfront purchases, I think we're a few years away from the majority of upfront purchases being that way. But given that it represents hundreds of billions of dollars around the world, there's lots of opportunities for growth as we see just up and to the right transactions, and that's happening now.
How are you making that happen? Are you going to publishers individually and doing an education campaign? And if so, what's the feedback that you're getting from them about why they can't move fast?
Well, it's a lot of building trust. Like, price discovery and building trust are a pair. They're a combo. So creating price discovery that is not just pennies at a time, but millions of dollars of commitments, just takes time. And you've also got to get visibility. You need people to understand what they're buying and selling. And there's a bunch of work to be done on that to make the market just continue to improve on its consistency and integrity, so that people can take greater risk.
So the challenge, I would imagine, then, is that, let's say you're taking the risk, you're buying into a forward market with a publisher, and you are hoping that they have strong enough forecasting and measurement to be able to fulfill your forward market commitment or buy, but they don't. Is there any way that the person who is, or the advertiser that's trying to make this bet on a forward market buy, can ensure that they're not taking so big of a risk that they're going to just lose all of their money?
Yeah, so in commodities markets, there's a concept of true-ups, where if delivery doesn't happen for whatever reason, because you're buying sometimes long in advance, then you define in advance what the penalty would be for not complying with the contract, essentially, in the forward contract. The same mechanisms can exist here. So part of the way you manage the uncertainty is say, hey, if we're wrong, what happens? And you just define it in advance. And honestly, that's been one of the problems with the upfronts and buying in advance in television, is a lot of the way we've dealt with that in years past, especially in linear or broadcast traditional television, has been, if we're wrong, we'll figure it out. And then you kind of negotiate after the fact. And you've been pretty dependent on maintaining the relationship, because it was controlled by so few people. As this gets bigger, and as the world of advertising gets more fragmented, as connected television becomes more accessible to SMBs than traditional television ever was, it's not really possible. It's not really the way you want to do it to create price discovery and accountability, but it's also not the way to scale.
You just mentioned connected TV. To what extent does this idea of a forward market rely upon us being a more digitally savvy, connected TV industry as opposed to a linear TV industry, because part of this assumption is that we have better measurement, we have better forecasting because of data. That's a streaming thing.
Yeah, it's 100% dependent on the move to CTV. So this sophisticated forward market that I'm describing is really for CTV or fully addressable advertising, to be more specific, and really nowhere else.
So now that we've gone through some of that wonky stuff, let's go to some of the sexy wonky stuff, which is the topic that we've been talking about all week, which is AI. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty amongst advertisers about to what extent AI can be a change maker for the positive or for the negative. I would love to understand how the Trade Desk is thinking about it and how you're incorporating AI into your forward market thinking, but also just the company.
Yeah, so first, I don't know that there has been a topic, at least in the history of the Trade Desk, that is more hyped than the current state of AI. And I think in my entire career, its only rival is the .com era, where everybody thought that anything that was .com was going to mint money. It turns out there were some amazing money makers in the group, but most things that had .com associated with them weren't successful. I feel like the same thing is happening a bit with AI, where everybody's racing to say they're doing something in AI. And ChatGPT in particular has created lots of conversation. And because people for the first time saw GPT in action, people assume that's what all AI looks like. And that is not what all AI looks like. And deep learning models have application all over advertising. And especially in our platform, there are so many places, whether it's in predictive clearing, where we're trying to predict what is required to bid to actually win the impression, which is different than what's the highest somebody's willing to bid. We've been running that with AI models for over the last year. It's just one of the examples, but our bidder has AI attached to it, where basically all the covariance is picked up from AI. There's a whole bunch of things where AI can be applied that don't have to be ask me anything, which is what ChatGPT is, and not the only application for AI.
But Jeff, that's not the sexy thing.
That's true.
Right? Jeff Green, so much that we went over today, and like I said at the top, this is a topic that's so near and dear to my heart, covering media and advertising, so I'm glad that we got to have a conversation on the beach today. European Universal ID coming to market now, very timely that we're here in France. It's also happening at a time where there's record regulatory scrutiny of companies like especially Google, which is now being officially investigated by the EU for antitrust in its ad tech market. You noted that Gannett, a major U.S. publisher, is suing Google for antitrust. In the response sort of to that dominance, per this conversation, is transparency. One of the things I asked you what Google should do to balance these two competing pressures of privacy and antitrust, you said, was to be more transparent, less opaque in the supply chain. I think when we talk about sophistication in advertising, your solution that you're backing right now is this idea of a forward market, which is different from a spot market, where you're just sort of buying things in real time. It doesn't give publishers enough time to really optimize for the best deal and outcome for them. And that's really about eliminating uncertainty for them. We talked about how do you hold people accountable if they don't actually meet the marketers what they need. And you said, look, we've seen this in commodity markets. You can just offer them a true-up or some sort of contract in advance of what they would be owed. The big picture here, though, is that a forward market and all of these advances in TV buying are really dependent on TV going to digital and CTV, connected television, becoming a full-time reality. Last thing we had to talk about AI. You said it might be one of the most hyped topics in the history of the Trade Desk, maybe only rivaling the .com bubble. But it doesn't mean that you're ignoring it. It just means that you're not necessarily having to always do the ChatGPT sexy thing of the moment. Jeff Green of Trade Desk, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And I'm now very pleased to be introducing my colleague, our publisher, Nick Johnson, who will be having a conversation with Integral Ad Science, who, by the way, has made this entire segment possible. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. Sarah, thank you. I'm Nick Johnson, the publisher of Axios, and I just want to come on and really briefly say a huge thanks to Stagwell for making all of this possible. This is just an amazing space, and we couldn't do this without them. And everything we do at Axios, we couldn't do without our partners, the investments we make in journalism, and then hosting conversations like this. So a huge thanks to Integral Ad Science for making this conversation possible. And so I want to welcome to the stage for a view from the top, IAS's Chief Commercial Officer, Yannis Oshis. Yannis, welcome to Sport Beach. Good to see you. So let's start big picture, maybe. For folks who may not be familiar with you or your company, give us your elevator pitch. Like, what are you doing here? What are you talking about?
Great. First of all, great to be here. Beautiful location to be with all of you. So Integral Ad Science is a leading media measurement and optimization platform. So what we do is we provide the most actionable data to help deliver superior results for both advertisers and publishers and platforms. At the end of the day, no matter where ads are run, we want to make sure that they are viewed by real people in a brand-safe and suitable environment. And in doing so, we want to deliver better ROI for advertisers and better return on investment for publishers. So a lot of topics common to what we touched on with Jeff before.
So let's go. We'll get to brand safety in a second, but let's talk about what everyone is talking about, AI. How do you view it from your vantage point, and how does it fit into the results you're trying to drive?
Yeah, AI is obviously something that I've been hearing about so much here in Cannes, a very big topic of discussion. It feeds into a number of trends I want to talk a little bit about. One is increased use of social media, especially with the advent of companies like TikTok, with all the growth that they're seeing, increased consumption of video, increased need from brands to do things like brand safety, but also brand suitability, ensuring that their ads are next to suitable content for their needs.
AI is a tool that can help with that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, how do you ensure that you go inside a video that we're surrounded by with all this video content and know that that video is suitable for your brand? So that's an area that we, as an AI and ML company for years, have been focusing on. We've delivered a solution called Total Media Quality that breaks down a video into frame by frame and then analyzes every single image, sound, and text to classify that video very properly into brand safe and suitable categories.
But there's a flip side to this, right? Like we talk about AI being a tool for brand safety. AI is probably the greatest tool for brand danger.
Yes.
Also, how do you view the darker side of AI?
Yeah, it's definitely early days in AI, and always, whenever you have a new technology, there's always room for bad players to happen. For example, one of the things that we're hearing from a lot of brands is concern around deep fakes and representing their brand incorrectly, and potentially completely having videos that are completely inappropriate and misrepresenting. So there's a very big need in the industry right now to detect what is AI generated and to flag it. And that's an area that we're also very much utilizing AI and ML to.
And so we could talk about AI the whole time, and I don't want to because that's all everyone does. Let's do one last AI question. Where do you put it on the hypo meter? Is it real? Is it Web3 silliness? Or is this something that's really impactful?
Oh, it's very real in my view. It is on the positive side of things, and I'm a very positive person overall, I will say. It creates incredible opportunity. There's so much, especially in the field of advertising, that AI opens up. Mostly rapid experimentation in creative, like amazing testing of creative, amazing creative testing of campaigns.
Using it as a tool to push the limits of those kinds of
Absolutely.
ideas, right?
So humans can determine what the goals of the campaign are. AI can help determine all the different permutations that creatives could take in order to deliver against those results. And companies like IAS can help actually measure it and make sure that we reliably report on its impact. So it's a major opportunity, and I see a lot of positive possibilities.
So keeping brands in a safe place is really only the first step. The next step is once they're in that safe place, delivering value. Give me your latest thoughts on sort of like achieving monitoring, delivering that.
Absolutely. This is another very big trend, and I'm hearing a lot about this in Cannes, but I've heard it for months now. In the advertising space, advertisers want to minimize waste today more than ever. It is a factor of the macroeconomic conditions, but also they're becoming increasingly savvy. So I think that there's a lot of best practices that we're seeing advertisers take. One is to marry the cost of impressions with the actual quality and conversion effectiveness of impressions. So for example, to give you just a very tangible one, major advertiser we work with used to run a campaign on 36 different supply-side platforms. Think of this like 36 different general buying strategies, but they didn't really have a very good understanding of the what was the quality of each of those supply
They're just
sources.
throwing a bunch of stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks.
Spending
then,
across, yes.
right?
And they got some things around, was it viewed or not, but they didn't really understand, was it converting or not? So we work with them to really help understand, for every single impression, here's the cost, here's the quality, and here are the conversions associated with it. And in the end, they literally were able to optimize every single impression to the highest ROI, if you will. And that resulted in a 22% cost savings impact, basically, for them. So that's one very big trend. Another big trend that I would say, and Jeff touched on it actually before from the Trade Desk, is this cookieless world that we're moving towards. It hasn't happened fully yet, but given Apple's moves, given Google's moves, advertisers need to future-proof their business. They can't rely so much on personal identifiers to optimize their campaigns.
Then tell us about the future of that.
So a lot of what's happening right now is, again, AI, going back to it, I hate to, but
Can't help but talk
can't
about
help it. Natural language processing is a very big trend right now around analyzing the content on a page and reading it almost like a human so that you can understand what is the context of the page. Even if I know nothing about you as an individual, I may really understand the context of this particular page, and that can lead to a lot of good performance for advertising. So what we're doing at IAS is developing more than 600 of those contextual segments and helping advertisers expand to those segments, get more reach, and increase the ROI.
And this is, I think we talked about this a little bit before, this is a little more digging into the profile of the human on the other side that is more than just like a browsing history.
Yes, exactly. And it's less about who the person is and who they live. It's what is the content that they're consuming, understanding that content, and then being able to optimize your advertising based on that content. So it's privacy, favorable, like it's abiding by the rules of privacy, but it also gives you really good insight as to what is most likely to convert.
Is this also understanding a little more about content consumption, right? We've all done one search just to look at something, and then now everything we get is just on that. Like I look up one Taylor Swift photo, and now I got to buy Taylor Swift tickets forever.
That's exactly right. Humans are much more interested in that, and sometimes advertising just follows you around. Actually, even after you've purchased the bag that you looked at, once. But I think it's really important because one of the things that we do is we try to identify segments that may not be as obvious that advertisers need to consider. Because they may not have gone to the, express that particular intent, but if you get them with advertisements there, you may significantly increase your audience.
It's a little more nuanced view than just individual web pages you may have happened.
Exactly. Or just give you a tangible example. Auto manufacturer may want to go to auto sites to advertise. That's obvious. But what about a life stage? You maybe just had a baby, and therefore you're looking for a new car for your growing family.
Right.
That's a great example of you've never told me about this, but we can get to that content for you to create a very valuable experience for an advertiser.
So the next piece of this, I think we're like walking down this path of how it works, is attention. Yes. Right, like capturing attention and delivering attention. Give me a 30,000-foot view of that issue.
Attention is another very big trend today because, again, it fits into this general pattern of advertisers wanting to deliver results. They don't want to just spend money for ads to be viewed. They want to know that ads actually were not just
clicked on. The next step beyond attention, but engagement.
Engagement,
even, right?
And even beyond engagement, to be honest, like they were clicked on and then purchases happened, like outcomes happened for the brand. So I think it's very important, and IS, that's the opinion of the company too, like to tie attention to measurable outcomes. And we've been spending a lot of time analyzing millions and millions of data points and realize that there's at least 3 big factors that you need to consider when you think about the attention of an ad. One of them is the visibility. Was it viewed, time in view? The second one is the environment. How much density is around the ad? Like, what is it competing with? And then a third one is
just flooding the zone with as many as possible, but understanding that entire ecosystem.
Exactly. You may be, many seconds in view in a page, but there's 10 ads, and your ad is not going to get a lot of attention. And then a third one is interaction. Did you actually hover over it? Did you play it? Did you engage? And then we're also working with a company called Lumen, which is an eye tracking company, to literally track the eye movement.
I love eye tracking studies. To see how eyes move, you can learn a lot.
Yes, it's incredible, like what you can do there. So imagine those 4 different signals. Each of them can help different aspects of the advertising experience. Some can help the creative team create better ads, maybe the interaction side. Some can help the team that's more looking at reach, more maybe the visibility side. But by and large, I think it's a very important area to focus on, and I think this year is a year where a lot of that will be defined, and advertisers will become increasingly confident in that.
This gets to the bottom line, which is value.
At the end of
right?
the day,
Like
that's
what,
it.
like delivering actual value. And you touched on a little of this. Is like how do you measure that and ensure that you're delivering the most value? What are the inputs that go into that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of attention, it's like, a lot of the things that I mentioned, like the viewability, was the ad viewed, the environment that the ad is in, and then the interaction against it. But then that's like just the measurement side. The other side of this is the optimization side. Measurement tells you what happened after the fact. Optimization actually helps you optimize your ads even before they run. So I see a future where increasingly, and we do that with other formats, increasingly attention will be something that you can optimize going to DSPs like the Trade Desk and being able to actually buy programmatically that way.
So we're running up against the clock. We could do this for another hour out here and sweating. But I do want to like really quickly, with the speed this is moving, with the rise of AI, like in having conversations with you, you have a startup mentality, but you work in a giant corporation. How do you square that circle?
Yeah, actually, it was a bit of an accident. I was a startup person for 10 years, and then the company I was working at was acquired by Yahoo and started working in large companies, and I really found a niche there. I actually really enjoy being a startup person in a bigger company, and the reason I really enjoy that is that I believe there's so much room for innovation inside bigger companies that startups can bring into the company. And to me, the key to that is there's a lot of creativity in companies. There's no lack of that. But there's a jump that needs to happen between something being creative and something being innovative. Creative means it's a good idea. Innovative means that idea delivers a lot of outcomes. It delivers a lot of scale. So a lot of the things that I try to do inside companies is build this very rapid experimentation loop. So build, measure, learn. Build something quickly, measure the impact, and then learn and optimize, and do that super rapidly. I think the most innovative companies have that loop down really, really rapidly.
That's hard in big companies. You're fighting the good fight.
It is hard, but it's actually, you can facilitate that as a leader by making learning the #1 goal of the exercise.
That's a good takeaway. So we're about to get the hook here. Axios tradition is that we end these conversations on one fun thing. We're going to get a bonus 2 fun things here. The first one, because we're at Sport Beach, I have to ask you a sport question. How do you keep your 3 sons from murdering each other? Tell everyone why they want to murder each other.
Well, there's a number of reasons, and we only have a minute. But
do the sport reason.
I will just do one sport reason. We're into soccer or football in Europe, but anyway, we're into soccer big time. I'm a soccer player. All 3 of them play. I play in a league. And for some reason, I made a parenting mistake. All 3 of them are from different teams, and they're different than my team either. I'm a Liverpool fan. There's a Manchester City fan. There's an Everton fan, Chelsea fan.
The recipe for disaster.
It is a recipe for disaster, and we watch every single weekend. We watch all the Premier League. We go play all the time, and I got to tell you, the engagement that sports generates is just unparalleled. There's nothing else in those boys' lives that engages them so deeply, which is why I'm so excited about sports as an engagement medium for humanity. And mostly I try to just, appease them by basically say, allow other people to win and lose and don't be too hard on them. But my main point is engage people through sports. It's one of the most beautiful things that we can do in our society.
We're literally here on Sports Beach at Cannes. The buzziest place on the promenade. Can't beat it. All right, and so now one fun Cannes thing to go. This is not your first Cannes.
Yes.
For Cannes newcomers, give us a hot tip. What do we have to do or what do we have to avoid?
Okay, hot tip, take a moment and soak it all in and understand how lucky we are to be here. It's so tempting to just go from meeting to meeting, which is what I've been doing, and kind of complain about how busy it is. But the reality is, look at this. We're in south of France. We're engaging with people on a very deep personal level, and we're not really showing PowerPoints. We're actually connecting as people, and that's a beautiful privilege.
That's a great
note.
To
avoid.
And just look at you're too hot. Just look at the view.
To avoid what's happening to me right now. Avoid sweating. So don't run from meeting to meeting, and definitely have a second shirt, which I actually have in my bag, so that you can always switch to it.
That is a pro tip.
That's a real pro. It took me 3 years, but I got there.
Giannis, thanks for being here at Sport Beach. Thanks for making today happen.
Thank you.
To the stage. Sarah, they cut my mic. Sarah Fisher, come on back.
Thank you, Nick. All right, guys. How we doing? Woo! Thank you again to everyone who's in the audience and to everyone who's watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on our website, on all of our social channels. I am so lucky to be here with Dan Callahan, who is the Senior Vice President for Data Strategy, Sales Innovation for Fox Sports. Dan, thank you for making some time.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Pleasure's all mine.
We got a little fan club over here. We were so excited about you, Dan, because you cannot have a conversation about live sports without talking about Fox. It's been an insane run. Y'all had the World Cup. You had the Super Bowl. You had college football. You had a huge renegotiation of Big Ten rights. It's been a massive year for Fox Sports. So the question is, like, within the Fox portfolio, Fox Sports is just one piece of it. You know, there's Fox News, there's Tubi, there's all of these things. But it feels like sports has such an outsized role for advertisers, in part because you have all these huge live rights. What role do those live rights and sports play when you're trying to think about how you're going to serve this Cannes community?
Oh, absolutely. Sports is the belle of the ball, right? I mean, we ran the numbers, and 98 of the top telecasts last year were sport events. All 100 were live. The only two that I think cracked the top 100 were the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and the Oscars. And a lot of those moments and events, including the Super Bowl, like you mentioned, were on Fox. And I think it's a great place for brands to reach a massive audience succinctly at scale. It's really the last bastion of a live linear event. 14 million people on your average Sunday for the NFL. You mentioned the fall. The tagline internally is "We own the fall," and now there's no off season, right? We've got sports year round, and it's an anchor to everything that we do. I think it's an important branding mechanism. I think it's an important place for advertisers to mass market their stuff, and then we get into, like you said, the rest of the portfolio are great digital assets, and we can unlock and do a lot of the programmatic and the targeting capabilities that Jeff and Giannis were just talking about.
So question for you. You just mentioned that number, 14 million people on average watching NFL on Sunday, which is extraordinary, by the way. But how long do you think that's realistically going to be? Because, you know, you see reports that ESPN is planning to potentially go direct to consumer. You're seeing big streamers like Amazon pick up rights to bring NFL games exclusively to streaming. How long can Fox Sports rely on that being a linear TV game?
We're hoping for at least the next 10 years. But no, I think it shows the stability and the strength of it, that it has maintained the audience and the viewership. And I think, if anything, that is what is maintaining the power of the linear portfolio and the linear offering to both the audiences and the brands that advertise with us there. And I think it's a testament that the streamers want the sports rights because they recognize the significance and the importance of having that as part of the portfolio.
So obviously, Fox has a huge portfolio in terms of streaming. You have Tubi, which is one of the fastest growing free ad-supported streaming services. But still, there's a reason, I think, too, that the commissioners of these leagues are continuing to put their content, their precious live sports content, on live television, on linear TV. What do you think is the upside versus streaming?
I mean, I think that when you look at the size and the scale of the audience, even some of our entertainment programming, I mean, that is now teetering at sort of 60-40. So there still is 60% of the viewership happening in that linear environment. You talk to different research people in the industry that I respect, and they've got different, dates that pendulum continues to shift, and maybe the digital portion becomes the larger, share shifts, the impressions. So I think it is a matter of time. Like you mentioned, ESPN sort of put a stake in the ground that 5 years they're going to start to take their sports ESPN Plus and put it behind a wall there. I think I look at the portfolio, and I'm excited about that as a salesperson, that we've got Tubi and we've got places to move these sports rights at the right time. But the financials of it, linear is still that, opportunity for everybody.
So for marketers, it used to be that the opportunity was like a 30 or a 60-second spot alongside linear. Like now, part of what your job is figuring out how it can be so much more robust than that. It could be a linear spot, it could be digital, et cetera. Walk us through, like, typically what Fox Sports would be able to offer a marketer if they came to them and said, look, we want something that is 100% cross-platform, cross-portfolio. Like, what would it be that it would look like?
So I think it'd be a mix of all of our offerings, right? I mean, great conversations throughout the week here that creative matters. We talked about audiences and measurement really for the last 2 years, but I think the festival itself has sort of taken a return to the importance of creative. And with that, sports is the best place to market and brand. And I still think, as the data innovation and strategy guy, like, you can't retarget and addressably target unless you've branded and marketed, right? So I would always encourage, and every time we're asked, like, you've got to you got to start somewhere. And live sports, for me, is the best place to do that. And what's great is we are having those cross-platform conversations. We are selling our sports, commercials across both, linear and streaming. Important to point out that 7% of the Super Bowl audience was streaming this year. So it is a thing.
Is that a record?
It was the biggest. Yeah, I was looking at the numbers, trying to do my homework before I came to see you. But yes, it was a large Super Bowl, 116 million people all in, and 7% was up 2% from a streaming capacity the year before. So it's growing. And yes, I think it continues to be exciting. The portfolio, I guess, go back to is what matters. And being able to brand and market and then retarget and do all the fun, addressable, targeting, digital stuff as well. So you need both. It's a happy marriage of branding and ROI and performance.
When I think about Fox Sports, for so many years, it was football. I mean, it was Thursday night, and now obviously you have college football doubling down on Big Ten. But there's a new kind of football that Fox is really getting big into, and that's European soccer. I think it's been a huge change in how I think about Fox and how you're playing in sports. Walk us through what the World Cup rights and what that opportunity looks like for marketers.
I mean, have to plug the Women's World Cup. I think it kicks off in 30 days in Australia and New Zealand. And saw a panel earlier this morning about the importance of investing in women's sports. And it's amazing the women's team is going for a three-peat. We couldn't be more excited for them and for that content on our network. And sending a trip over to go and watch some of the games, so it'll be fun. And then soccer, the next Men's World Cup is in North America, right? So there's going to be no bigger soccer opportunity domestically than that World Cup. And I think it just shows the excitement around the sport in our country. I mean, it's huge here in France and in Europe generally, but massively growing domestically in the U.S.
So, like Nick did, we love to end all of our interviews on one fun thing. It's hard to even list out all of the places where Fox has really huge sports rights. But what's one that's coming up in the future that you're really excited about? I know you just mentioned some football. Anything else that we should be looking out for?
Selfish plug here, as my boss is in the audience, but the European Championship in 2024 is in Germany. So I'm already pitching a trip up to Germany on the tail end of Cannes to go watch the quarterfinals. But I think the European Championship in 2024 is going to be amazing. And I'm hopeful I can justify a reason to go up there and see a game before we go home.
So if you're a marketer and you're working with Fox, does that mean that you can do like a beer chugging contest in Bavaria with you?
Jake's not paying attention, but if Jake wanted to spend some money in the Euros, we could probably head up next year. So there we go.
Jake will make it happen for you. Thank you so much, Dan. This is absolutely incredible. 98 of the top 100 broadcasts are sports. Incredible thing to think about. I love that you called sports the belle of the ball. It's true when it comes to live TV. I agree with that. I asked about sort of the deprecation of live television rights, and you said that you think, probably for the next, hopefully 10 years that we're going to still continue to have stuff on linear TV, and asked why. It's really the size and power of that linear TV audience. 14 million people on average on Sundays for the NFL. That's a pretty sizable number of people. One of the most important themes of the week that you pointed out to me in such a prescient way was that the power of marketing and creative is more important today than ever before. You said it perfectly as the data and innovation guy. You can't retarget unless you have good creative up front. I'm so glad that we got to talk about soccer, Women's World Cup, the importance of communicating and talking to a diverse audience, but particularly women at this time. And then lastly, I love that you are plugging already for your boss to bring you to Germany and Europe 2024. If I'm allowed to come, I will see you there. Dan Callahan of Fox Sports, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now, please welcome my colleague, the fantastic media reporter, Carrie Flynn.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, we're closing out the day here of Axios' programming. I am so happy to be joined by Reddit COO, Jen Wong.
Hey, Carrie.
Jen, thank you for joining me today. So, as you might be able to tell, we're at Sport Beach. So I wanted to start off hearing about what sport fandom is like on Reddit. What are the best sport subreddits that I should be, following?
Well, there's a lot of them because there's a lot of really passionate fans on Reddit. You've got our NFL, our NBA, golf, and the fans. The cool thing on Reddit is that over 70% of the Redditors in those subreddits, those communities, they come throughout the year. So it's not just when there's games or when there's a draft, when there's a specific moment. It's throughout the year, every day, which is really different than any other platform, which tends to be moment-driven. And what's cool is there's communities like our NBA merchandise, where people are just like showing off their merch. Or there's, even in our NBA, it's not just about like the players in the game. You've got like people who are hosting events around championships. You've got like, how do I get my kid excited about NBA? Like all kinds of different things, which is really, really amazing.
I can personally attest to the fact that I spend all year round on some of those subreddits you mentioned. So tell me, we're at Cannes, obviously all about ads, money flowing in. So how do brands participate in some of those communities you're talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, for on Reddit, we're organized by over 100,000 communities. Every topic on the planet, every like league, team. I mean, you could possibly imagine cricket, AFL in Australia, like you name it, it's there. And what's amazing is that advertisers can come on and target based on your interest and find people in the middle of the conversation. So right when somebody's having a conversation, you can target based on their interest. They can target based on keywords. That's something new that we launched. And it's very, very special because everybody on Reddit is seeking information. Like they're looking to hang out with like other fans, learn something new, get a question answered. Really, really different. It's not like endlessly scrolling. It's a very deep, kind of dive that people go into.
Well, I'm curious though, like, again, as a Reddit user, these communities are really passionate, right? Like, how do these brands not be like icky on the platform? Like, how do you balance participating in those conversations without like making those subreddits feel like really like commercialized?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what's important on Reddit is one of the most human platforms in that it's humans, individuals talking to each other. And so what's important from a brand perspective is to show up in that way, right? Show up in a way that normal humans would behave. You wouldn't walk into somebody's community and start like shilling immediately, right? That's not, no, you would go in and you'd have a conversation, you'd listen, you'd know the vernacular, you'd learn how to show up. And it's our job to help brands learn and listen and understand how to show up. And when they do, it's incredible. I mean, the research shows that when a brand shows up on Reddit, basically Redditors respect that brand more, they trust that brand more, and they actually become more brand loyal. And the reason why is because they love that the brands showed up in Reddit in a space that they trust and in communities that are important to them. So it's actually the opposite. There's like I think a myth that like because communities are so tight and they're so passionate that they don't want, that brands are interlopers. It's actually not true. The opposite is true. In fact, if you look at Reddit, 94% of Redditors, like they're on Reddit looking for information and actually looking for recommendations on like what to buy, what service to use, and like information that basically leads to some sort of transaction or decision. Like it's very natural on Reddit. In fact, during the time here at Cannes, 18 million personalized recommendations will be generated on Reddit. It's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Yeah. I am contributing to those, for sure. So speaking of passion, we're using that word a lot today. There's been a lot of, you could say, passionate action happening on Reddit recently.
Sure.
So in addition to advertising, Reddit is now looking to make money off of essentially its data. It's their API, if you know what that means. And that caused some backlash, and certain subreddits decided to go dark for 48 hours. Certain subreddits that, I subscribe to. It was madness on my feed. So I'm curious, first off, what was your response to that action?
So first off, we don't sell data. Like, we have an API, which is a way that third-party developers could access Reddit and build on top of Reddit. And we love that. We love building an ecosystem around Reddit. It'll help us build an ecosystem around ads, around our communities. It's awesome. And with the changes that we made, just to be clear, 98% of developers were not impacted. But there were a small group of developers who were, that a small vocal minority of mods use, and they were upset about it. And the reality is it's okay to protest on Reddit. We've been here before. But we usually move past that. And, it's just, like, for us, it really shows how passionate people are about the platform. We respect their right to protest and to have a conversation. and then we move on. We're usually better for it. The reality is, at this point, the vast majority of Reddit users, they have a normal experience right now. It's not any different. It's probably returned for you too. I mean, and the fact is, users, they want to use Reddit. Mods, most of our mods, they want to mod Reddit. You know, for the handful of mods who were protesting, we heard you. I think that's something that we respect. We're very different than other platforms because we allow that. But the reality is, like, we're mostly past that. And we learn from it, and then we move on, and we're better for it. So, you know, it's Reddit. It's probably the only place on the internet where you can have that level of discourse. So we take it as a appreciation and view it positively in that people care enough to actually protest things.
And like you said, you have been there before, and
Yeah.
so not your first rodeo. Well, I'm curious then, can you also speak to why this new business strategy? Why are you charging for that API access?
Yeah. Well, again, for context, we've probably gone the longest of anyone in having a free and open API. Most of our peers closed their APIs long ago, and others had charged for a fraction of the access to the API. So for us, like, we've actually tried to stay open for as long as possible. The challenge is for a small group of heavy users, I mean, they're truly heavy users, right? And so as a result, there's real cost involved, et cetera. So it's a normal business decision that others have made years ago that we've made now. And, you know, it's very sensible. We realize that causes people who use some of those apps that are impacted, you know, some change that's upsetting to them. We get it. That's real. But it's still, I think, like a sound and very consistent business decision with, like, every peer. So I don't think it's anything extraordinary, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of business, so, you know, you're able to make more money that way. But when it comes down to the advertising business, as I'm sure you're aware, it's been a really difficult market. So I'm curious what your point of view is of the future of that and what the rest of the year looks like for the advertising market.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the forecast, I mean, when I talk to folks, I think people think the overall ad market is, you know, roughly flat. It's like holding in there maybe a couple points of growth. But, you know, we're so new and early in our journey that the opportunity for us is getting our proposition out there and gaining share in new categories and new segments of advertisers. And that's what we're really focused on. I mean, we've been growing the number of advertisers on our platform. We've been growing geographically outside of the U.S. We've been growing share in new verticals. And we've been investing in our ad platform. Like, we, for years, have wanted to do contextual keyword targeting. There's a lot of words on Reddit. Well, one of the benefits of that is that you can contextually keyword target like you do in search. And that's amazing because that's really high performance, in context, you know, down to the brand or topic that you want to be next to in the conversation. That's amazing. Or for years, we wanted to do product ads. We finally released that where, you know, we play this role in the consumer decision journey where it's like, okay, I want to know what real people think about this vacuum or this car. It's a very important pivotal point. And now, because people are actually talking about products and services in that moment, we can actually have an ad that corresponds to it. And that just makes a lot of sense. So we're excited about that. And we're also really evolving the platform to have a space organically for businesses and entities beyond individuals. Because Reddit today, like, the users are mostly people, but we think there's a lot of room for businesses and entities to be on the platform, not necessarily just with advertising, but to be involved in the conversation organically. We're creating a space for that, which I'm really, really excited about.
Reddit, never
Leads,
boring.
teams.
There's so much going on behind the scenes in addition to what I see every day on there. Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And thank you so much to our partner, Integral Ad Science. They're the reason we were able to put on these lovely conversations today. Follow us for more content tomorrow here at Sport Beach and read us every day, all day, Axios.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Karen.